So we're going away from the rift lakes in East Africa and wandering into the various African rivers and discussing their diversity. I want to be sure and thank Aquarium Design Group for hosting us today. They were very gracious, and Jeff and Don and Mike and Josh and all the guys here, and we really appreciate it. I do maintenance here, but every once in a while I actually come in the shop. I want to thank all of our admins for all, and anybody who brought food. You know, it really is appreciated. This is a big kind of family. Yeah, you guys are all family. We know y'all from online. I mean, it's nice to be able to see that face of the person that's helping you. And do you have anything that you'd like to add? No? I've got it. Okay. I'm trying to think. Some new stuff that's coming down the pipe for the club itself is we're working on finalizing some stuff for t-shirts. So that should be within the next little foreseeable future. I think you guys will be excited. We are. They look kind of cool. I know I will be speaking at the Texas Area Killifish Organization's Bell Review this July, and then I will also be speaking at the Golden Kings. Me and Jamie will be at the Golden Kings event over August 4th, and that's 4th and 5th. Oh, that's over by the Galleria, right? Yeah. The Galleria. I'm certain that you'll see more information posted, but you know, those are some events that we got going on this summer. We also have Photos coming. Houston Cichlid Club hosting Photos this October. So yeah, we've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. Let's see. Let's dive into West African. I say West African. West African is where we generally collect most of the species that we see that are primarily in the hobby. There's not very many species there's a whole bunch of cool fish that are down from the southern part of Africa, like South Africa, and there's a bunch of really cool stuff that's found up on the north end of Africa. But we don't oftentimes view those as riverine species. I'm not certain why. I guess most of it isn't very ornamental. Literally all of your tilapia species, your Mozambique tilapia, your blue tilapia, those are all riverine species. They're just from the Nile. They're not a bad-looking fish, and they're wonderful for food production, but not exactly as the best aquarium fish. South Africa's got a bunch of really oddball, cool things that are awesome in an evolutionary ichthyologist sort of way. I geek out a lot, but yeah, otherwise people are like, wow, dude, that is a gray, ugly fish. And you say it's mean? You can only keep one in a 30-gallon? Yeah, no, I'm going to pass on that one. So they just don't have the marketability that the West Africans do. Now, when we think of West Africans, naturally in Africa, we've been kind of led with the East African rift lakes. And we know that a lot of the African riverine species come out of those lakes. There's a lot of mixture. Lamprologus is a genus that we find heavily in Lake Tanganyika. But it's also found in the Congo River, where Tanganyika drains into. There's actually 4 species of Lamprologus that are riverine that just live there. Our only blind species of cichlid is a Lamprologus that's found deep in the Congo. So it's hard to kind of put this imaginary line up and go, okay, we've got lake-dwelling ones that are all high pH, and then we've got the riverine ones that are not. It's not exactly always that cut and dry. Africa, if you've ever looked at the rivers of Africa, all throughout West Africa, it's really neat because all the rivers start inland.
There's your link for what
Oh, See, she's got a wonderful cichlids.
I couldn't find a projector, so I brought a book.
Hey, correct. They run from the center to the ocean. So it's really bizarre because you've got literally all throughout West Africa, you've got all these rivers that just run straight to the ocean. You've got a handful of things that diverge into it, but really, it's not like the Amazon where almost everything's interconnected like a web. There is no interconnection. So in the past, these species, due to flooding or ice ages, have been able to kind of cross these river systems. But it causes almost all these rivers to be isolated. And if there's any awesome thing that isolation does, it brings about evolution because each one has its own food sources, its own challenges in that river system, its own minerals that it deals with, and they each kind of evolve to suit that environment. So you have a lot of different color variation in, even downstream in one river. You've got this collection point looks like this other collection point looks like that. It has, in most of the riverine areas of Africa, you can really break it down into a slow-moving river or a fast-moving river. And really when we start kind of developing the aquarium, that's really where we kind of target. You are either going for kind of a slow movement African stream, and you kind of work in some driftwood and some of the Anubias and crinium, these things that are that tolerate that lower movement. And you have fish that are like, the crebensis, the various Pelvicachromis, even the Congo tetras. That's some of those kind of fish. Compared to the river rapids that would be buffalo heads and Goby cichlids. I mean, really, these are more indicative of a hill stream tank, if you've seen it, where you're having 3 to 4 times the water, turning over in like 10 minutes. You've got large power heads, a large amount of rocks, heavy oxygenation. Whereas things like the jelly bean tetra and some of the Nanochromis, they come from these kind of slow-moving river areas where there's dense vegetation that just kind of rots and the pH falls. If you have fast-moving water, that pH is not going to fall. It's just not. There's not enough. The water's moving too fast through. It's just a nature of the water. Honestly, the water in West Africa, generally speaking, is about a 6.8 in pH to about a 7.5, which is not very far off from ours. So if you were trying to go for that in a mix with our tap, I would probably say that a good ratio would be maybe a quarter RO water to about 3. Am I buzzing? Oh, okay. Apparently that's grounded. About a quarter RO to about 3/4 of our tap would probably be a good mix for it. Temperature-wise, they don't like it as warm. They really don't. I would probably suggest about a 76 to about an 82 being the high. You start creeping up higher than an 82 and they're not going to be too happy, especially some of the more sensitive species.
They don't like it about 78. 78 is about as high as I would go.
Oh, really? 78. So, honestly, I would probably keep them unheated where need and just let them go at room temp. I don't run heaters. We really don't run heaters on anything. But that's just our opinion and, our approach. It depends on the species. West African tend to come from those cooler regions. Africa and South America used to be connected. So it's neat seeing this weird evolution because Africa's it's almost the dark continent where there hasn't been as much exploration and the areas are much more dangerous. One of the more famous expeditions, just as an FYI, I thought it was a cool story, so I wrote it down. It was on the other page of notes. Henry Stanley, who was exploring the Congo. He managed to get to the Malebo Pool, if I'm saying that correctly. That trip took 999 days. And this was in 1870 something, so a little over 100 years ago. But it took almost 1,000 days to get there. And out of the 356 people that started the expedition, would anybody care to wager how many survived?
75.
114. That is that is, I mean,
Just to be clear.
yeah, that's literally one person lived out of every 4 people that started. That's pretty rough. I mean, you're talking about disease, that you're traveling over rough regions. I mean, eliminating lions and tigers and bears, there's still a lot more. I mean, really the butterfly barb, which is a gorgeous barb species, it disappeared from the hobby for almost 20, 25 years. And everybody went, I remember seeing it. Why haven't I seen butterfly barbs? And nobody could find them. Well, in the small little region that they're found in the Democratic Republic of Congo, literally rebels were fighting a civil war, and nobody could get in there without getting shot. So everybody went, okay, well, I'm not going over there. I'm not going to die for some butterfly barbs. And that's, with the instability inside of Central Africa and those nations, literally the landscape politically is hard. And then once you get these fish, you've got to transport them to a place to get them out, which is its own endeavor. And you've got a mixture of all this weird political red tape that you've got to go through, and each country is unique. There's no unified kind of, you just X, Y, Z and you can get fish out. No, it's never that easy. It can present a very difficult challenge to any exporter. We just are lucky that we happen to have a really awesome importer that is from that region and is willing to go through all that headache. That's a lot of the reason why you just can't see it. You just don't. Most areas of our country, we never see, they might see cribs, and that's pretty much it. Cribs and Congo tetras. And that's because they're reproduced in captivity. I mean, anything that's wild, oh no, that's way too complicated. They're just not going to do it. Let's see. I am going to let Katie discuss the cichlids of that region and kind of her journey. She has, if you don't know it, Katie has been breeding and raising African Riverine. Yeah, she's got way more experience than me. And yeah, she is. Whenever I have a question, I contact Katie. Who I go to. All right, here she is.
All right, it's going to be a little bit. I'm going to have a hard time today with the microphone. I had carpal tunnel surgery on both hands Thursday, so we're going to get through this. But as Roy said, I've been keeping West Africans for 7 or 8 years now. Been breeding them that whole time, and it's not crazy. I'm not looking to do anything. I just love watching. Well, can I just talk? Can y'all hear me if I just talk? All right, so I've been breeding them, and I don't care about the money aspect. I've always said that about the hobby. To me, it's always about their bond and watching the mating ceremonies and that sort of thing with these fish, because each fish is completely different when you start talking about dwarf riverine cichlids. Sometimes the males are the ones that are colorful. Sometimes the females are the ones that are colorful. So it all depends on what you're doing. But before we get into the crazy breeding stuff, let's start talking about the basics. Why we like the dwarf riverine cichlids that we love so much. And most of the reason why we like them is they do well in our water. They prefer a higher pH. So you can run them in our standard tap water, which is how I raise most of mine, is just straight tap water. And they do really well. They don't need a heater, so you don't have to buy that extra piece of equipment to keep running on your tank, which makes it a lot easier to just maintain a tank. The third reason why we love dwarf African riverine species is they enjoy small tanks. So you don't need your massive 125 gallons in your 6-foot tanks. They do well in your 20 longs, your 40 breeders, your 29s. So they do well in your smaller tanks as long as you don't put 100 in that tank. But they do really well in your smaller tanks. Now, fish species, as far as riverine species, I'm going to go right to it, the Pelvicachromis species. Now that is your normal cribensis. And we can't call them cribs anymore because they decided last year that let's just do a name change. And your standard crib, which was scientifically was your Pelvicachromis pulcher, your crib is now what used to be Pelvicachromis taenatus is now Pelvicachromis cribensis. So we can't call our standard pulcher cribensis anymore. That's more on the store's end than my end, but
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is happy about this name change, but whoever decided it was higher up than I was.
Someone who writes the species book so they can print new
I
books.
no, even they are like, what are we doing here? So I
Yeah.
don't.
And also, I think it's going through notes from like literally the 1850s and ray counts that these dudes did, and going, wait a minute, they must have found this fish. Well, they're the one that named it, so they get priority.
Yeah, I don't understand why they did it, but I think even the importers are like, come on now.
Yeah.
Because when you see them listed, they're normally listed as Pelvicachromis taenatus cribensis on the side because that's their true name, but they have to list taenatus because that's how most people that are into it, like a nerd like myself, knows them as. So your Pelvicachromis species. Now, the reason I start there is because those are probably your most colorful dwarf riverine species. And they do well in your 20 longs. Heck, you can even get a mated pair in a 10-gallon and they tend to do well. So they do really well in your smaller tanks, which is what most of us generally keep. Most of us always have your smaller tanks compared to your big 125s, 240s, 300s. You know, most of us keep the 20s, the 40s, the 55s. And these fish do well. And there's different collection points for each one. So you might get a Pelvicachromis taenatus from low bay, which is like a blue base, which, don't worry, I have a book here. We'll go old school, and we'll start pulling up pictures. But like a low base system, they have a blue base, so most of them are blue. And I'm not going to be able to find it on command. But, so, like this. This is Pelvicachromis taenatus, or is what looks like this. Now, depending on your collection point, like there's pages of just different collection points. So depending on where you're collecting from, you could have yellow fish, you could have blue fish, you could have purple fish, you could have red fish, you could have, and it's all within the taenatus species, so they're genus. But, I mean, they're beautiful fish. So if you have smaller tanks, they do well. But they also do well with other fish. So you can keep them in a community tank, and they do very well. They're not aggressive unless they're breeding, and even then their aggression is very low compared to what your peacocks would be. So that's why I highly recommend, if you want to get into riverine species, the Pelvicachromis. Now, with the Pelvicachromis, there's two different groups. And we had a name change here again, surprise, surprise, the higher-ups. And it went to Wallachachromis. So you had two groups. You had Group 1 and Group 2 Pelvicachromis. Group 1 is now Wallachachromis, and these get bigger. These get about 6 inches. The taenatus, the pulchers, the subocellatus, which is your Group 2s, those stay small. Those get 3-4 inches max. So these stay small fish. That's what we go for. Stay away from the Wallachachromis because they're normally more aggressive and they get bigger, so they will need a bigger tank.
Is the Sacromontis in the second group?
Yep, that is still a Pelvicachromis.
Because that's the giant crib, right? I mean,
But it depends on where you read and who you talk to and all of that. But yes, so that is still considered a Group 2. But no, this fish species is great. And if you want to get started, they're so easy to take care of. They accept most fake foods, so your fake food as in your pre-manufactured foods, your flake foods, your pellet foods, that sort of stuff. So they're just super easy to care for, normal water changes. And if you'll have questions along the way, shout them out. I'll answer them as best I can. I'm no author, but I try to learn. And I'll explain.
I could change, you can write a book.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody would want to follow
I have
that.
a question.
Yes.
So with the Synodontis, is there a pretty strong push within the hobby to keep the different collection points separate in terms of breeding? And since you said the Synodontis are pretty distributed, throughout the United States, what would be the collection point that would be most highly associated with the fish that we see in the general U.S. hobby?
So, my thought is keep them separated by collection point. And that's just me. I don't care as much for hybrids. Don't burn me at the altar here, people. But I don't care for hybrids. And each of these fish has different characteristics than a different collection point. Now, most Synodontis we see in the fish hobby here, most of them will probably be from Malawi, however you want to pronounce it.
Bullaway or
And most of them are your yellow with bright red fins, is generally what they are. But that all comes to store. The store should be able to get from their importer who got them, where their collection point is, and all of that. So I can't speak per store, per se, but I know here they list what collection point they are. That's why their name is Mayukus, or Lobe, or Bipindi, which they have back there. So they tell you exactly where they're collected from. Now, collection points are generally about the same, temperature, pH, all of that. They do well at the high 7s, low 8s, and cooler temperatures. So generally they are the same, but I don't prefer mixing them. Everybody can do what they choose, but I prefer to keep them separate.
But wouldn't that also follow along with the pattern that cichlids have in the past in the hobby, whereas and specifically people either want wild caught for color or know the strain, and let's say if they're F1 or F2 from that generation or from that collection point, when you start mixing in, it just becomes cribs or whatever like that, and so they lose some of the specific draw that some people that are looking for species have. So when I want to keep different collection points to see the differences between them because they are so distinctive. Whereas in what you're picking up from PetSmart is maybe from some big commercial breeder or something like that.
And I think
any
general
larger chain like
cribs
that, I'm not
probably
saying
have been
anything against it.
hybridized.
Oh, absolutely.
There's probably a dozen different, strains that have gone into our common crib that we see.
Because the wild caught cribs, I can tell you, are not what you would see in your local store. They don't have near as much color. They're very bland compared to the bright, beautiful fish that you would see in a store. So clearly they've been interbred with something else, but without genetic testing, I would have no idea what that is. And
Selective breeding on killers.
Yeah, don't the Synodontis have 3 basic colors? Red, base body, red, green, yellow, right?
generally speaking, they do. And it depends on, now each one is a little bit different, and I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh, that one is from this region, because there's just too many variants, and I've never been over there to go wild collecting, so I couldn't tell you.
I haven't seen any reds forever. I think it's because of the rebels.
That's actually
guerrilla warfare.
That's actually Nigerian, so it actually ends up being more northwest, and there's not much collection that goes up there. It's mostly more towards the south.
Because Nigeria right now, if you want to not ever come home, that's where you go.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you've got generally people that collect fish in the hobby, sadly, in these countries are usually the poor people. And, having the equipment to do collecting and keep them alive, bag them, and then know somebody that they can drop them off to at an airport and get close and get paid a decent wage, it's a weird bargain there. Because you're also dealing with tribal leaders and tribal rule and, religious ideology that goes on over there. It's a weird mixture, and finding that happy home where people can really geek out about and nerd out about fish and Latin names and where they're collected. It's a hard kind of match to make.
Yeah, if anyone ever sees a red, please let me know.
All right, so Pelvicachromis, that's where I would start. That's where I did start. 7 years ago. So that's where I would start. They're great fish. They're easy to take care of. The next fish species that do really well in our water, but are a little bit more sensitive to water chemistry as far as your nitrates and nitrites, Congochromis and Nanochromis. They also stay very small, about 2 to 3 inches. Males generally maybe 3.5 inches. But they're a super colorful, bright fish, most of the time having a blue base that shines out in breeding coloration. They're a really good fish as well. They're from your slower moving waters, your tree roots, your caves, the leaf litter. More of like a blackwater sort of tank. They would do probably really well in a blackwater tank. Plant-wise, Anubias. You can't go wrong with Anubias with those fish. Crinum natans, which apparently I can't ever keep alive, so I don't know how they do with it. Crinum calistratum.
Calistratum, Medusa plant.
I can't pronounce it, but that's a good plant for them. Bulbitis, that sort of plant, the large leaf, the darker waters, the tree roots, the sand, the leaf litter, they do really well in that. And you'll get them to breed. You'll get them to breed if you do that with good high quality food and water changes. Now, saying fry survive, that might be a different topic because they could be live food only sort of fry, but such is life there.
Yeah.
But Nanochromis, Congochromis, and I kind of bunched them together because there's discussion right now on scale count, that wonderful scale count on the fish. So some people want to say the Congochromis is Nanochromis and some of the Nanochromis is Congochromis. I'm not going to get in that fight. I
You
can't
have
keep
no
up.
horse in that rodeo.
I can't keep up. I mean, one day it's like, okay, so Congochromis is no more, they're all Nanochromis, and then next week they'll come out and say, no, they're all Congochromis and not Nanochromis. So take your pick, however you choose from the high up. I can't keep up with it. So
What kind of parents are they? They're about the Friday.
they are good. They're aggressive though. When they breed, they are super aggressive. So they tend, when they breed, they don't do as well in a community tank. So if you get any Nanochromis or Congochromis, they do better as like a species only sort of system. They're very aggressive when they breed. They will kill off, if you have other stuff, anything that gets close, they will rip it apart. So, in the nicest way possible. I'm trying to be G-rated up here, but they're aggressive. I mean, I wouldn't say they're peacock level aggressive, but they're aggressive for what West Africans are.
And I mean, probably choosing things that were surface dwellers like butterfly fish or lamb pies that would basically hug that water surface, you'd probably not have any issue whatsoever. But if you had African darter characins that are literally in the same sort of region of the tank that they are, they would just be natural targets.
So, does that answer it, or do you want me to go farther in depth? So that's a good one, but they do well again, they can do well in your 40s, your 20 longs, that's 29s, that sort of tank. So they don't need a massive, massive tank. If you have multiple breeding pairs, the bigger, the better. Now my favorite group from all of this would be Benitochromis. And these guys get bigger, but they are beautiful. They're on the critically endangered list, most of them. But they're amazing fish. What's great about Benitochromis is they're biparental parents. So you'll see them 1 minute and your females will be holding the eggs. The next minute, the male will be holding the entire batch that's fry. So they just constantly are switching back and forth. And what's great about it is, I'm assuming from where they're from, they do that so that way they can continue to eat because they're a more aggressive water. They are a more aggressive West African cichlid, but they are beautiful, which, let me get my book up here and find it.
Yeah, I take care of a 600-gallon in the field that has some wild-caught Benitochromis nigrodorsalis, and they've been going almost 9 months, and they've just gotten their 3rd batch of fry. And this is the first time that enough of them have survived to where they're actually going out and foraging. And yeah, Katie was trying to twist my arm into trying to catch some out of said 600-gallon, and I told her that she was crazy.
I would have gone swimming with them.
They're real pretty fish, but they're definitely larger, and it's definitely a unique kind of aquarium to watch.
So here's the species, the Benitochromis species, and there's different, it's just like any of the other fish, different collection points have different color variations.
Mm-hmm.
The Nigroduralis is a very pink belly, beautiful gold dorsal fins. I mean, when they are in spawning coloration, it literally looks like somebody dropped a 24 karat gold piece of jewelry in there. I mean, it just shimmers and it shines. They're beautiful fish. They're pretty bland otherwise, but they're beautiful fish when they're in spawning colors. But they are cities listed, they're cares listed. Almost all of the entire species is critically endangered. So this is a fish that if you get them, have experience with West Africans because they are a little bit trickier. They are aggressive. When they pair off, they get very aggressive. But they're great fish. They're beautiful fish. They're big-bodied, bold-tempered. Come and greet you when you got food at the top of the surface. They'll be getting you wet, splashing you, trying to get live black worms, whatever you're doing. But they are beautiful fish. They're good fish. If you have a chance to get them, I really recommend them. Like they're, I don't know. That's where my heart lies.
Having a little bit of experience and having a bigger tank setup is definitely some needed. I would start looking in that 55 to 75
I was going to say
gallon range.
a 40 breeder would be the smallest I would want to keep. Multiple pairs.
Yeah.
Multiple pairs long term, a 40 breeder. A 75 generally would be the next best option.
Honestly, I think I've got 8, so 4 pair in that 600 gallon, and I always see ripped fins. Always. Like, there's just not enough room in that 600 gallon for all of them to get along. Yeah. Yeah, they've got some spunk, but those are 4.5, 5-inch fish. And, you know, they run those Congo tetras that are easily that size. I mean, one of them ripped the jaw off of one of them. Yeah, literally, one of the ladies was like, "What's wrong with that Congo?" I was like, "Oh, dude, its jaw's missing." She was like, "What happened?" I was like, "Well, your fish are breeding." And she was like, "No way." I was like, "Yeah, I'm willing to bet that Congo zigged instead of zagged, and yeah, got the bad end of that Benitochromis."
So, but I mean, they are great fish though, and they have a good personality, and they are beautiful. They really are beautiful. It doesn't matter if you have. There's 3 common ones. The Riomunensis, which is what like this guy would look like, this girl, I should say, which maybe you all can see, maybe you can't. We'll go old school. So that's what a Riomunensis looks like, and they're beautiful. They get big though. These guys are pretty common. The blue mungo finley, which there might not be pictures in here. Pictures up here, they're little pictures, but they're more whitish, bluish. I'm trying.
Oh, no.
I
I'm
just
going to
figured
hold.
it's easier
I'm going to hold and
sometimes for
flip
people to see
for you, so that
pictures.
way you don't have to hold it.
But this is what a blue finley, and those are more common that you'll see out of Benitochromis species. And this one right here, this is Nigroduralis.
I had a question. What's the difference between a male and female? Because I have
No difference. Good luck. When breeding tube is down, there's different reports out there, but they are extremely difficult to tell males and females. The only way I've ever noticed a difference is when they're in full breeding dress.
Okay. Yeah, in full breeding dress, I noticed the strong difference in Nigroduralis, but otherwise, like for almost all of its like first 6 months, I was like, oh well, I think the red-bellied one is a man. No, maybe that's female, and I went back and forth. I think that the females are the ones that are redder center-wise, but that's just
But I've
from my
also heard,
experience.
so the Nigroduralis, their top fin gets really black, and I've heard by their speckled pattern on the rear of their dorsal fin also tells between male and female. I don't have enough experience to be able to tell you which one's a male and which one's a female. And at juvenile age, not breeding, it might be almost impossible. But that's the way for most Benitochromis. There's no way to tell the difference between male and female 9 times out of 10 until they breed. So, but those are the 3 different Benitochromis species that you'll see if you see them in fish stores. They are harder to get. But is there any other ones that you want me to speak about? There's Chromotilapia.
Yeah, Chromotilapia.
So Chromotilapia, are big-bodied as well. So they're going to get 6 inches. They're pretty bland most of the time. They look like yay. So your basic gold-bodied, silver, black lines, nothing fancy. The breeding dress is beautiful. They've got what's that called? An expendable jaw. So when they breed, their bottom jaw comes out almost like a gecko would and flashes bright red to the female. And their mating dance is pretty cool. They've got you can kind of see in this picture that their dorsal fin also bright gold when they're in breeding dress. But they haven't been seen very often lately. They're harder to come by. I haven't seen too many of them lately at all. They used to be popular, 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Don was saying he saw them all the time, but it's been a long time to find them.
Wow. Let's see. As far as cichlids, what did I have listed? Hemachromis, which is something that honestly, anybody that's really into West African Riverine always forgets it. They always
Because
forget it.
everybody puts your I call them hemachromis,
Hemachromis.
whatever you want to call it. That's your red jewel.
Yeah, it's a
But
jewel
where do you
cichlid.
see your jewels normally? You see them in your African tanks. But they are a West African riverine species. And don't worry, this whole book is pretty much dedicated to them. If you don't know what they look like.
They're pretty.
I've got those breeding right now.
Yeah, and honestly, no one thinks they think of them as a lacustrine, but they're actually a riverine species, and they actually do better in a riverine setup. If you put them with Malawis, they oftentimes will get bullied.
I was going more for the nano stuff. And
Well, I'm trying to cover it all. We're talking about West African riverine, so we cover it. Gobiocichlids. Now, Gobiocichlids, they're a recent. There's only 2 species. They are a varioletic species, which is fast-moving. These are almost, I imagine mixing up the Nanochromis and almost a Stephidin Goby, and you have a Gobiocichla. They're really they cling to things. They are very quick, fast, darting things, but they tend to not be too aggressive. They're aggressive with each other, but otherwise, with the other fish in the tank, they're really passive.
Depends on which species.
My opinion. Now, color-wise, their color is not anything to write home to mom about. I mean, they're cool because of their rarity, but yeah, their personality and behaviors more so than color.
I guess on the Gobio species, there's Orthochromis, the Orthochromis species, which is like a buffalo head. So they get the big nuchal hump the males do. But they like to stay at the bottom. They kind of have the smaller swim bladders, higher green content food. But their personality is, I like them. They're cool. They're mean, but they're really cool. They enjoy the caves. I actually have I have breeding pairs and I have fry. I just posted a picture on GHAC of my dominant male. They get beautiful orange and yellow in their pectoral fins. They're beautiful fish. They really are. But they're not as common. They're not highly sought after either, though.
Yeah.
They're
The Steatocranus, which is the buffalo heads, are the other. That's another rheolitic species, very fast water. I know that Ken has worked with them, so we have some folks that they're tricky. They're not an easy species. Don't get me wrong. You'll see the large nuchal hump on the males. There are a lot of other tilapine species. There are heterotilapia and orthochromis and stuff. They are illegal. Some are illegal. So be aware of what tilapine species we're playing around with.
any Oreochromis.
Or tilapia. You can have a license to actually breed them.
You can, but your exotic license won't cover most. Then you have to get your actual zoology permit.
Okay.
Not that I've done research.
I know you have.
And
Honestly,
the state doesn't care if you got them accidentally or whatever.
No.
If you've got it, you've got it. It's on you.
yeah. And
So they don't care.
I'll have kind of
You don't want a
Katie,
game
like,
book
you
bag.
know, or we'll kind of flip through the book.
I was gonna say, this book, if you are interested in riverine, like dwarf African cichlids, this is about the only book out there, and this is about the best book you can ever get on it. And I'll have it up here if you want to see it, take pictures. I believe I got mine from Amazon 3 years ago.
And we'll
4 years
post it on the event page.
But this is about the only resource that there is, like paper copy wise. Which, whether this is true or false, I don't know. But everything he has had in here has been true from what I have read. So, if you want to continue with
Oh, yeah.
Tetras and
All right,
Chiles
so
and all that
we're
fun
going
stuff.
to talk about things that are not cichlids. That's one of the neat things about this biotope, and especially with West African, you can actually kind of get into things that work as a community tank. So, osteoglossids are usually where I like to start. We have two. The Pantodon buckholsi, or the African butterfly fish. Probably, in my opinion, the best arowana if you want to keep an arowana in something under 150 gallons. If you want a small arowana, it is like a small arowana. It sits at the top, and it only gets about 6 inches. And
Looks like a dragon.
they're really neat. They're fun. Throw bugs in the aquarium. That is what it eats. It is an insectivore. If you see them from above, you will understand why they call them butterfly fish. If you see them from the side, always you'll have no idea. They look like butterflies because they got these gorgeous wings that have this lace pattern. That's just gorgeous.
I don't see him as often as he used to either.
African arowanas do exist. There is such a thing. It is actually a very large fish. It's the only cousin to the Arapima. So it's not actually related to, it's kind of along the same cousin line as the Arapima. It's a plankton eater. So it generally is a filter feeder, but they can get kind of large. They're difficult to feed. It's not something I would put into a general tank. Dude, you're talking about a 3-foot thing that you have to bomb food into the water column. It's a little weird.
Especially a baby whale.
Yes, yeah. And it looks weird. It doesn't look like an arowana. And it swims in the middle of the tank, which is very un-arowana-like. Most people, when they see it, they'll go, I don't know what that is, but that is surely not an arowana. And it actually is. It's just a weirdo. I see them once or twice a year, and they go for like $300, and everybody's like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, dude, you've never kept one. Dude, when you keep one, you will go, wow, I can see why these things never get sold. Mudfish, Fractolamus. They are really weirdos. I think Don's brought them in like once or twice. They're really odd. I wish I had a projector. I did a Monday Weirdo Oddball feature on them. They are these weird tube-snouted fish that are extremely odd. They are the last member of their family. They're really weird. They're just straight up weird. They stay small, and honestly, if you're feeding live worms, they get along with pretty much everything else. Synodontis. All right, I'm going to kind of group. Like you've got Riverine synodontis, and you've got those are very similar to the microsynodontis. The real differentiation is the ocular orbit. Am I correct, Mr. Jackson? It's just the way that the eye socket is, but microsynodontists generally tend to be smaller. If you haven't ever seen one in person, we do have some in a tank back there. I'm showing Jackson. They're itsy bitsy, but they're kind of cool. Synodontists are naked squeaker cats. Really, they get along well with a lot of the other African riverines, and they can take a little bullying. A lot of people go, well, they don't have scales. Let me tell you what, dude, they can hold their own in a Malawi tank. Synodontists are bruisers. The natural reason that they oftentimes move upside down was not just some weird quirk of nature.
It actually is because bugs fall in the water, and it was easier for them to eat bugs if they turned upside down. And so they're cool. They actually know which orientation they are. But at night, whenever the bugs all hit the water, instead of waiting for them to fall down to the bottom and have their head do like this, they went, well, you know what? If I just suck it down to the top, it's going to be a whole lot easier. And they just figured that out. And it was just easy.
Mine like hover over everything.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what direction they just hug everything, no matter what direction it is.
And some of the big riverine species, you can get into like the mustache or the baton sodas, and they can get really sizey. I mean, we're talking about, up to a foot. These are some sizey catfish.
So in most of the synodontis that we have seen in the hobby, those are the riverines, and they're not actually from the lakes?
Yes, the only ones that we're going to see from the lakes, there's one species from Lake Malawi, and then there's all the ones from Tanganyika, which are the cuckoos, the petricolas, the multipunctatus, the granulosas.
So Ruptus, Angelicus, those are all riverines?
Yeah, all of them are riverine. And there's the flaviotis, which is the orange, that's gorgeous if you guys have never seen one. There's the hammerhead, the pleurops, with his eyes that pop out of his head. Huge. They're kind of neat. We call them hammerhead synodonts. I like them. Polypterus, the bikers, or the bickers, or however you want to pronounce that. It always sounds weird no matter which way I say it. There's a lot of different ones. Honestly, in true bikers, I would avoid them in a community tank. Let me tell you, from years of experience, I love bikers. They eat anything that will fit in their mouth and sometimes stuff that won't. I had an ornate that chewed off the back legs of a mud turtle. It was its own size. It chewed its back legs off and did not drown the turtle. So it had to have been fast. And the mud turtle can pull its legs into shell. It has a sharp beak. I would surely think that this could defend itself against a fish its own size. No. I was like, wow, you are mean. You are going to go in your own tank. I have seen them eat pimelids, bristlenose. Like the list goes. I've seen them eat puffers, dude, and it still didn't kill them. And I was like, dude, that was a bad idea. You're gonna die. He was like, yeah, whatever, dude. I'm going to live another 10 years. They can breathe air. I found one on the floor. It had probably been there for about 7 or 8 hours. It looked like it was a cocoon of cat hair. It was fine in like 5 minutes. It was all just swimming around doing, dude, when are you going to feed me? They are, they're one that you could do 100% water change. Just drain it to the gravel and then just start filling it back up. You're good to go. They've got very primitive scales that are ganoid as opposed to the normal fish-like scales. It is like armor. Dude, let me tell you what, try to grab one of those things, it is like a greased eel. That thing will just get out. It has teeth, it can bite. Some of them can get up to 40 inches with, what's the...
Like inlays and...
Yeah, the Congo...
cherry Congo.
The Sea of Nightmares.
Yeah, there's some of them that get really big. Some of the Senegals are a little bit smaller and probably a bit better behaved, but would I say stick these with crebensis? Probably a bad idea. Eventually, the bicker will win. They're neat when they're small, but yes, it's definitely a different sort of theme to the tank if you get bickers. Just get a bunch of bickers, and then they will just fight amongst themselves, and you will have an enjoyable tank. You can throw in liver and they will shred it.
Small babies.
Yes. Now, that said, there is one oddball that kind of took a left turn and just kind of kept going his own path, and that is our reed fish. The reed fish or the rope fish. It is actually also a bicker, but it is extremely different. It is much nicer. The problem with them is that everybody else eats before they do. They are very scared. Anything spooks them. That's been my opinion.
I think that happens with bikers too, and that's why they eat so many fish.
Could be.
Because I've watched mine don't have any fish to compete with, and it still takes them forever to find the food.
Yeah,
Well,
it could
they're
be.
ambush predators.
Yeah.
It goes with the territory. Their design is I wait and hey, something came my way, I guess I'll eat you, versus
Well, like they smell it, but they'll just like kind of make their way over to the food, and they pass it up, and then they go, oh wait, it was over here, and they kind of turn around.
like guiltily going back to the left. They're like, no, I'm not gonna get second. Okay, I'll get second.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine them being to eat with other fish in the tank.
Yeah.
I
I
just
mean,
can't
honestly, I
imagine
think
it.
that's one of the problems with ropes. Now, ropes are very social. So I will say, if you're going to go for a rope fish tank, dude, go all in. Like, get like 6, 8 of them, and get a nice big tank and do a rope fish tank. Then try to find some stuff that might work with them that doesn't outcompete them. But, I think that would be a great tank, and you'd have success. I think throwing one rope fish into a community tank, it's a recipe for failure. Because then he doesn't eat, he starves, and you go, man, dude, rope fish are junk. And you're like, just a different way, different tactic. Puffers. There's a lot of riverine puffers in Africa. Our mabu, it's found in Lake Tanganyika, but it's also found in the rivers. The fahaka, also another gorgeous riverine puffer. Those are 2 of the largest in the world. Let's see, there's the Congo puffer. Very cool one. Every once in a while you'll find a red one. The red color that's the money color. If the collector finds red, that's when they get the money. They'll almost double to triple the cost of a normal Congo for the red color. They're actually a ambush predator. So they dive into the substrate, and you see about this much of their face, and they just kind of check everything out. And they wait until something comes along, and then they just kind of go, and they breathe it in. And then that is all. Then it goes back to hiding. It's a really easy going. They actually do well in a smaller tank. They don't need a lot of that room that other puffers are going to be pacing in. The spotted Congo we occasionally see. I've heard mixed opinions. I've never seen one in person. So I've seen them on some lists. Usually they run for right around 200 to 300 a pop. So yeah, not everybody's going to just plunk down some big cash on a puffer. A puffer I've never seen before? Sign me up.
The nice thing about those is that they don't tend to bother fish. Like,
Oh, really?
No.
See, I've never gotten any
They'll
personal
go after
hands on.
inverts, but they won't bother fish.
Wow. And that's the shooting denty.
Sounds like an easy
Another is the Cross River, which is the ballin puffer. I've seen one. It ran for 2,500, I think. About 10 to 15 of those come out of that small river system in Africa a year, and that's what ends up on the whole market for the world. So those 10 or 15 can fetch like ridiculous amounts. If I'm correct, Mattress Mac's wife is the one who ended up with that fish. Just as an FYI, next time you run into Mattress Mac's wife, be like, hey, I hear you got a Cross River puffer. And she'll go, wow, you're probably one of 2 people that know that. And you will have a long conversation about cool, weird puffers.
Is the dragon puffer from there too?
The dragon puffer is actually a Southeast Asian species. So those in the ABs and the hairy puffers are all Asian, Southeast Asian. Let's see. Going on to giraffe cats. Giraffe cats are another one. We can find them in the lakes, but they are also in the rivers. The dwarf giraffe is probably your best bet. It only gets 18 inches. I think that's the dwarf. Now the true giraffe, they're probably best to avoid. I love the look of them. They look like a cool giraffe head. I mean, put a giraffe head on a catfish and make it giant. I couldn't have asked for a weirder fish. But that fish also gets 3.5 feet long and it weighs a lot. You're talking, like this thing eats like you're cutting up tilapia to feed this fish. It's not like, oh, hey, let me go down and get some more NLS. Now, it will eat through NLS. You're talking meat. This thing actually is a huge fish. I rarely find tanks that are large enough to support them, long term. So-
Houston has, like, they went in there.
Yeah,
And some bikers too.
Yeah, and it's a massive fish. If you're going to try a dwarf. And even then, you're getting an 18-inch fish at adult size. These are not a joke, Most fish don't get this big. Next thing, barbs. There is an insane amount of barbs that come out of Africa that we never see. They just don't ever end up in the hobby. They're kind of silver and bland. They used to be in the hobby back in the 60s when no one had any clue as to what fish color was. They were like, oh yeah, we'll get some barbs, and man, these are silver and junk, dude. Nobody wants these. We only see about 3 or 4 regularly. Even then, those are rare. There's butterfly barbs. If you've ever seen butterfly barbs, I think that Jeff has a small tank with some butterfly barbs if you want to see it. There are J barbs, which are gorgeous, another nano barb that's from low pH regions and kind of that kind of horn of Africa there, the Ivory Coast region. There's also the fasciolatus, or the kind of fire barbs. Those are the big 3 that I've seen. I have got some red-finned East African barbs at a field tank, but I don't know how Toyin got those. Dude, I don't even want to know. But yes, they're really cool. They're 3-4 inches. They school real well. I can see that color-wise, they're just not, oh my gosh, They're really cool. I think that the more we start looking at building a kind of West African drive in the hobby, the more we're going to start seeing a lot of these bycatch species being brought in. That they're not just going out for the prettiest stuff, but also the stuff that can work with them. Gouramis had their heyday over in Asia, but that is not the only place that gouramis are found. They've got weird cousins that ended up in Africa, and they kind of went their own route. They're still members of the Anabantoidae group. So they still breathe air. They still oftentimes are mouth brooders, bubble nesters. But they are the Cynipomys and the microcynipomys. Really, microcynipomys are only differentiated by size. Some of the other Cynipomys can get quite large. If you've ever seen a Kingsley in a Tanganyikan or a Malawi tank, that's naturally found in those lakes. These are 10, 12-inch large. They oftentimes you'll see them sold as leaf fish or African leaf fish. They're not an African leaf fish, and they're not a leaf fish. They're gouramis that are ambush predators. Most of the gouramis in Africa are ambush predators. You can use them. And the austere, is that the normal one? The standard is the austere. But occasionally we'll see the ornate microcynipomys and the banded microcynipomys. Those would be good choices in a riverine tank, for kind of some variety. Lungfish, they're found there. Lungfish are very big. They're very aggressive. They will bite you. They will. They will do this. You're talking about 3 to 4 foot fish that are highly aggressive. Really, they don't work in anything beyond a single specimen tank as far as I've seen. I don't even think they'll work with each other. I think that they'll actually kill each other. So, no, they are. Yeah, we see them occasionally. They're not. I made a nice list of all these fish just to cover them. If anybody's got any lungfish questions, yes, they're just not common. Oftentimes we see placos used for algae control in these tanks because we don't have an option.
sadly, the option that actually exists, that's what works in the environment there, is labios. There is a massive collection of cool shark minnows all throughout Africa. There's some even found in Malawi and Tanganyika. They're gorgeous. They're unique, different colors, and all of them are illegal in Texas. They put a list, they put a ban on them. They said no more. I don't know why. Sadly, that is the case. Now that moves into elestids. All right, so we all are familiar with the tetras in South America. They are awesome, but tetras managed to actually move that to that other region of Africa, and they evolved in their own way. There are Congo tetras. There's jelly bean tetras, Adonis tetras. There's the Neolebius, right? Am I right? Neolebius. The Ansorges. They look almost like little pencil fish. I know because he got the last time, but he got some. I remember Renee getting them. I was like, no. He beat me to it, man. There's a lot of interesting Congos and relatives that we're seeing come out. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at the moon tetras, the African moon tetras, they're neat. The blue Congos, there's yellow Congos, there's lamp-eye Congos, orange Congos, some red Congos. There's a lot of really neat stuff. Another group is the Distichotis. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Distichotis. They're really brightly colored. They're highly aggressive. They can get up to about 40 inches. These are massive fish. There's a long-nosed Distichotis. There's some silver Distichotis in greens. There's also a watermelon from the Tefe River system that's gorgeous. It's black and red. These are big tetras that don't like other tetras. It is a very solitary. They will kill each other in the same tank.
Most of them are pretty gray when you get big too.
Yeah. And sadly, the gray color is the flaw of those fish. People go, what happened to that really pretty color that it had? No. It loses it. There's an African darter carcin that we occasionally see, but oftentimes they occupy the same region, like of the tank that Pelvicachromis and stuff. So in a community tank, they're not always the best choice unless you're kind of focused on something, an African riverine tank that doesn't have West African dwarfs in it, which would be weird, but that would be cool. I would love to see that. Mormyrids. I think that's something that we only find in Africa. Those are the cool elephant noses, baby whales. Some of them can be very big and aggressive, but there is a large amount. It is a very diverse family. We're talking 120 to 160 species. Probably more will be found. A lot of them are small. They need pristine water. I mean, they are not a beginner's fish. You know, they're electroforms, so they sense electricity around them. They're neat. Hit me up if you got any questions further on them. Knifefish. There's actually a handful of knives that are found there. We've got the African brown knife that used to be common, but I haven't seen it like in a long while. But they only get to about 8 inches, which is actually fairly reasonable in a community tank setting like that. You'd have to watch out about it eating fry, but otherwise it would actually be a good choice. There's the pom-pom knife. Those are a little bit bigger. Paprianus acus?
Something like that.
Okay. Yeah. They get much bigger, and they're spotted, and they almost look like an arowana. Sometimes you'll see them called arowana knife, but they call them a pom-pom knife. There's also an oddball called an aba-aba. I don't know if everybody's come across an aba-aba. It's like a knifefish that got turned upside down. Their dorsal fin is the undulating fin. And they're very large and very aggressive. A lot of owners have problems with them biting them. They pretty much will shred. Yeah, they will shred anything that comes in the tank with them. I've seen about 2 or 3 of them. They're usually weird oddballs that probably go.
Fish Ranch 2 down there by Alameda Mall used to have a couple of them. Okay.
The biggest ones about this big.
Yeah.
And they were by themselves.
Yeah. I've heard rumors that these things they don't play well with others. Let's see, spiny eels. A lot of the spiny eels we have come from kind of Southeast Asia, but there's a handful. The Liberian, the yellowfinned are both African. There's actually some yellowfin back there. They're smaller, but there's a handful of spiny eels that come from those regions. So don't cross them off your list. A lot of those are actually smaller species. Finding information. They used to be Afromastus embellus. Now they've moved everything back into Mastus embellid. So when you're searching for something, if you try to add on Afromastus embellid, whatever their species name is, you find a ton of information. And what they are currently, you'll find nothing. It's just the tragic flaw of naming. If you're going for a brackish, the African scats, which we happen to have the only owner of African scats in Houston that I'm aware of with us. And the moonies,
The African scats are not beginner friendly.
no, they're not, but they do African riverine sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're aggressive. They're the meanest fish I've ever seen. Very aggressive.
Yeah.
But they're beautiful.
Yeah.
If you like blacks and purples and yellows.
But
And they get big.
Because the moonies are the what am I thinking? The fingerfish.
I'm trying to think. I know which ones you're talking about.
The striped. Those are also. I don't know. I just don't know.
You're talking about the monos?
Yeah, the monos. There we go. Thank you.
I was
The flatfish.
Right, dude. I
love all
completely
flatfish.
Those are also another African.
Yeah, the sea bass.
They come from the African rivers, and in that kind of brackish region, all the way out to the ocean. So those are
Yeah,
kind of
usually
doing
you
that.
see those two together if you're going to have a tank of one.
Especially ones where they tend to like more salty waters the older.
African scats actually prefer straight freshwater.
No, like the Brackish.
So they can, but with our high pH, they tend to do best with no salt in the Houston area. If for tidbit of information. But we've got high pH, so they can do well with hardness.
We've also got some gobies that come from that region. Gobies aren't really commonly imported. We've been starting to see more and more of them kind of start wandering in. There's a few. They're no caves.
But they're
So we're getting more into Nanochromis, and I was wondering, so you said that a lot of the fish of that genus, the fry, need to be live fed.
they may I have not had success with breeding any, of those Nanochromis species. I would presume they would do best with live like baby brine and stuff like that. I don't have experience. And I have yet to find information on people that
I would even say that baby brine might be even too big. I mean, they're
I
so
was gonna
tiny.
ask about like the microfauna that would live within a planted, like in the blackwater tank, if that would be sufficient, or if you'd have to do it.
It's possible. I would probably, if were it me and you knew that breeding was what your target was, I would honestly start big infusoria cultures. Infusoria, you can always add it into the tank. It's not going to hurt it. But all of that paramecium and stuff would probably bolster up the chances of survival much greater.
You can do that for the
You know, if breeding is really an option, you know, those green water things, lettuce, some old tank water, sit on windowsill, done. Just let it roll. Those are good.
Yeah, but aren't a lot of the Pelvicachromis types, Nanochromis, they omnivores and even some of them herbivores?
True, but in that like early fry stage, I think the problem would be finding something small enough for them to like get enough of, and that's where I would go kind of lead towards an infusoria culture. I mean, it'd be great to have like micro worms or grindle worms, but
I think also adding just like fresh leaf litter and stuff like that, where you're going to get some biofilm on it. 'Cause I
Yeah. Yeah, that thick having that like a large tannin bed of like leaves that's been rotting for a while, where it's got that microfauna kind of growing in and out of it. Not overly vacuuming your aquarium. Don't keep that thing pristine. Let it get dirty. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, hey, I know it was a nice long one. I thank you guys for coming and sharing. I want to thank ADG and everybody here. Hopefully you guys, you know who we are on the group. Hit us up if you've got some questions. Let us know.